Welcome to the Center for Global Justice. My name is Betsy Bowman. I'm very pleased to welcome you today to our program, which features the prominent Russian Marxist economist, Aleksandr Buzgalin. You probably know that the Center for Global Justice in San Miguel Allende is a multinational, bilingual center for research and learning for a better world. We focus on supporting the solidarity economy and the development of self-management through cooperatives and worker-owned, worker-run businesses. The connection with self-management, of course, is not an accident, as you will shortly learn. I need to first also say that we have resumed our winter snowbird symposium, albeit in a new place over here at the Quinta Loreto community room rather than at the Biblioteca Pública. And we're resuming our educational travel programs. We just had a trip to Cuba a few weeks ago, and we're planning other educational trips in Mexico soon. Now that the pandemic is over, we can do this again. We struggled to get through the pandemic, as all organizations and everybody did. And if you enjoy our programs, please consider donating at our website, globaljusticecenter.org. And if you can make a contribution for today's program, that would be great. There's a basket on the table in the back of the room. Next week's program is going to be about Julian Assange. And one of our center members will be here to speak about the whole history of what has happened with him and WikiLeaks and the US persecution of a journalist and publisher. Today, our program focuses on Professor Aleksandr Buzgalin, who died suddenly October 18th last fall. He was my age, and it was terrible shock to learn of this. I wrote up a short homage to him that I'm going to read to you now before I introduce his program for today. And this will give you a understanding and an insight into why we at the Center for Global Justice focus on cooperatives as a form of economic development and why we support the solidarity economy. Over 30 years ago, in the fall of 1992, my co-author Bob Stone and I received an invitation to speak at a conference in Moscow on the Mondragon cooperatives. The excitement was palpable, speaking to Russian former Soviet workers about self-management. The word Soviet in Russian, of course, means workers' councils. So it's an organization of workers' councils, worker control and worker ownership of the means of production. How tempting we had to go. We are primarily scholars, Bob and I, of the French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, and we had no scholarly interest in nor deep knowledge of Russia, but we were eager to share our knowledge with Russian workers. We had recently visited the Mondragon network of cooperatives in the Basque Country of Spain, and we were very encouraged by their experiment in self-management and, as one would say in Sartrean terms, being one's own direct product rather than the product of our product. We're all the product of here capitalism in the former Soviet Union, a different economic system, but the goal is to be one's own product, not the indirect product of a system. We're committed internationalists and popularizers of Sartre's notions of freedom and human agency, which we think can better flourish in a society whose economy is built on self-management principles. So we got on a plane and we all met in a vacation house outside Moscow. There are about 100 or so participants. Our host was Aleksandr Buzgalin, a very energetic youngish man who spoke, as he said, barbarian Russian English. But he had such a charisma and smile that he quickly won everyone's confidence. And now, how this modest economics professor at Moscow State University could bring together so many Marxist academics from around the world and as workers, Russian workers as well, I was just amazed. Of course, this is just a year after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. There were still a few Marxists in the former Soviet Union or Russia. And he had reached out to a lot of Western Marxists to come and exchange ideas. Well, I learned quickly that he often brought together a wide range of Western Marxists and Russian workers and Russian academics. There at the conference, I immediately learned a new word, and well, it's new for me at the time, neoliberalism. This was before the word was in general circulation. And I was fascinated by the discussion of this new economic system, at least what I could understand of the discussion bouncing among Russian academics of various tendencies, our Greek comrades, Savas Michael Matsas, the Belgian Ernest Mandel, famous Marxist theoretician, various assorted Americans. I, of course, immediately learned an alphabet soup of acronyms like GATT, TRIP, WTO, IMF, of course, were things that we're all very familiar with now. It was a very impressive attempt to bring together Russian and Western Marxists to understand what was happening in the former Soviet Union and the rest of the world. Our host's wife, Ludmila Bulavka, who's also an academic, was the most open and welcoming person I had ever met. I learned that she and Buzgalin had been running an unofficial school of self-management. Many workers were attending their classes and meetings. We spoke to them about the Mondragon network of cooperatives. We had learned that we had hoped that the Russian workers would be exhilarated to learn about the amazing success of the Mondragon network of worker-owned, worker-run businesses. We learned that both Sasha and Lucy, like ourselves, are deeply committed to encouraging human freedom and individual agency in work life as well as personal and civic life. And they they shared our understanding of the deep connection between making oneself directly and self-management. Now, this was 92, though, so this was the very short-lived period of Rutskoy's voucher privatization. He was president of Russia for just a couple years, and he had promised Russian workers that everyone would receive a voucher worth about the value of a small car, so not insignificant, but not huge either. And they could use these vouchers to buy into the factory where they worked or the place where they worked. And we thought, well, this is a brilliant idea. You know, this will turn over ownership of the means of production to the workers. However, the distrust of the Russian government on the part of the workers was just bottomless. And nothing could deter their attraction to the American model of capitalism. And Buzgalin said, well, you know, I go to all this work to promote self-management and worker ownership, but probably Russia will end up with the most barbaric capitalism imaginable. And of course they did. The Russia of the early 90s, as you might recall, was just like a Greek tragedy. We returned 4 more times between 92 and 95. We were distressed by Yeltsin's election. We were shocked by the promotion of shock therapy. Remember that? the shock therapy of the early 1990s. And the fact that it was promoted by so many people who should have known better, like Jeffrey Sachs. But what we learned was that the project of shock therapy was fundamentally, and Sasha will be talking about this today, a process of primitive accumulation in Russia to establish a base for capitalist development. It was also the foundation of the system of oligarchs, as we know. And unfortunately, this system of oligarchs was adopted or reimplanted by the West in the West, as we've seen today. You know, out in the streets of Moscow in those days, in the subway stations, the fear of the people was absolutely visible in their eyes. Then came the bombing of the Russian White House, which is where the Russian parliament meets in 93, by the Yeltsin government. Their fear increased. We invited Sasha many times to the Socialist Scholars Conference in New York City and to other venues every year during that period of the 90s. And we wanted to support Sasha's programs and his work of connecting people around the globe. We see ourselves as sort of bridges uniting people in different places, and he was certainly one of them. Since those very heady and confusing days of the 90s back in Moscow and Leningrad, the four of us, me and Bob and Sasha and Lucy, his wife, have participated in conferences that focus on self-management in New York, Havana, 2001, Florence, Italy, 2002, Istanbul, 2003, Caracas, 2004, Dubrovnik, 2009. And I just list those to show that our interest in cooperatives and self-management goes back many years and has been enriched by our study of different experiments around Europe mostly and Latin America. We returned to Russia a few times after 9/11, but our work has taken us to Mexico and Latin America, where we've been for the last 20 years, working on self-management and our Sartre work, which we culminated in the publication of our book, Reading Sartre's Second Ethics, earlier this year. And we're very sorry that we cannot share this with Sasha, who always found in Sartre's theorizing a foundation for hope in human freedom and agency. We're looking forward to a possible Russian translation. Sasha told me recently on a visit to New York City, probably in 2016, that we are the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, we've been in the tunnel for a long time. It's a very long tunnel, but one of the brightest lights has gone out. Sasha is greatly needed and will be lovingly missed, but also emulated. He brought hope, understanding, knowledge, and courage to thousands, myself among them. The Greek writer quoted a Russian writer when speaking of Sasha and his memories about Sasha, and he quotes Velimir Klebnikov, I don't know who that is, again and again, I am for you a star. And Sasha was this star of ray of light for hundreds, if not thousands of people. So we're very sorry. He died suddenly, he's my age. And the publicity for today's talk states that he'll speak on the solidarity economy in the Soviet and post-Soviet Russia. But actually, the title for the talk that he gave, and this was on September 27, 2021, and this is what we're going to hear today, was 30 years after the USSR's fall. Oh, this is a newer one. Oh, okay. Well, then it is on self-management in Russia. Good. I didn't find that. So, we're all very fortunate to be able to have known Sasha and to have worked with him, and we're fortunate to be able to hear his comments again. Thank you.
So much, friends and comrades. It's big honor and pleasure to be with you, to see you, and unfortunately only in this computer screen, but I hope in the nearest future we are together and life will be better. I will start from a small introduction. Of course, when Russian militant of social movement speaks now, the main question is, what do you think about Ukraine? I will not speak on this topic, but I want to say that in our country, 70% support so-called military operation, 70% of population, official opinion poll, and the other abstain or no support. And I belong to minority. I just want to stress this. And I will not talk more about this topic. I will talk about this with Paul J. maybe in a few days, but not now. Sorry. And now to self-management and solidarity economy in our country. There are a lot of myths about Soviet Union, and one of the main is absolute totalitarian system, which dominated all time, everywhere, without any, windows of democracy. But it's not true. Different periods gave a very interesting experience of mass participation of working people in control, in decision-making, in planning, and it was not in one or another factory, it was in very big scale. First, very important period is period of new economic policy, just after revolution and civil war. This new economic policy started in 1921, and during 7 years, we had a lot of initiatives, such as workers' control at the enterprises. It was very developed system of control from below, by trade unions and by workers' collectives in all state enterprises. It's a very interesting experience. It was a national system. Second, in this period, we had real cooperatives and real communes, which gave example of socialization of means of production, socialization of labor, socialization of management. It was in agriculture, but not only in agriculture. And finally, we had fantastic experience of self-management among young criminals. It's not joke, it's not mistake. It was organized by Makarenko, a wonderful teacher, well-known teacher. I can say that in Brazil now, Center for Global, like your Center for Solidarity Economy, and they have a lot of books of Makarenko, a lot of books of Nadezhda Krupskaya about this experience. They made the enterprise, they made school, and 14, 15, 16 years old former criminals participated in organization of this republic. It was republic created by these young persons. And there are movies, there are books, they are translated into English. Unfortunately, not everybody knows about this experience. But this group, it was 300-400 in the beginning, and nearly all from this group became engineers, poets, scientists, and so on. It's a very interesting experience how people organizing from below could do this. But then, of course, Stalin's period led to the catastrophic decline of real democracy in all spheres, in all levels. But even at that period, even in the period of Stalin's dictatorship, Gulag, and so on, we had interesting forms of initiatives from below. It was so-called socialist competition. Okay, maybe 70% of this competition was formal, but 30% was real. It was, for example, competition and solidarity, cooperation of enterprises who were technically cooperated. And workers from one enterprise helped to workers of another enterprise to make mutual cooperation, to decrease costs, to create better technologies, to organize new forms of management and so on, even in Stalin period. And not in one enterprise, but in the system chain of enterprises. We had interesting experience of self-management on national level in pioneer organization and Komsomol organization. From one hand, it was very centralized and bureaucratic. From another hand, it was a lot of initiatives from below and on low level. Real young people, and not only young people, could participate in decision making and control and so on. It was terrible contradiction of dictatorship, mass arrests, Gulag, and from another hand, mass enthusiasm of people who were building another world. Another experience, which is also not known, and maybe Ludmila will mention about this, a partisan movement during Second World War. In our country, this is great patriotic war. Maybe you know that 50% of European territory of Russia, Soviet Union, was occupied by fascist troops, German Nazi, by Romanian Nazi, Bulgarian Nazi, and so on. Even French, Belgium, Dutch divisions participated in this aggression against Soviet Union. And it was in the forests, in the cities, in the towns, in the villages, struggle against these Nazi troops, fascists. And it was self-organization of people who were fighting and creating new forms of life in forests for 3-4 years, forms of underground work to destroy fascist communications and so on. It's a very interesting experience how people in extreme situation realized their initiative, and they were heroes because it was no money at all. It was no state at all. It was spontaneous movement from below, and not only in Russia, by the way. It was in France, it was in other countries, but less scale. The most interesting period for self-management is maybe period of Khrushchev spring. It was in 1950s, 1960s, but mainly it was growth of initiative from below in the sphere of culture, not in the enterprises. But it gave very big results because it was extremely rapid growth of level of education, progress of culture, progress of science. And in schools, I remember it was self-management of pioneer organization. Schoolboys and schoolgirls could participate in decision-making in the school, not what to teach and how to teach, but how to organize life. It was in universities, and even in 70s, we had some elements of this self-management in universities. It was in scientific organizations, much less in the enterprises, much less. And finally, we had the extremely contradictory but extremely important experience of real self-management during Gorbachev period, from 1987, during 2 years only. But during 2 years, it was national scale experiment, or maybe even practice, better to say practice, when it was a special law, and it was obligation to create in each enterprise Council of Labor or Workers Collective. And this council had very big opportunities to control managers, to participate in decision-making about all social questions, to control system of planning and realization of plan. Of course, with a lot of formalities, of course, with a lot of bureaucratic deformations. But it may be first time and maybe the last time when in the huge country, nearly 300 million people, second economy of the world, it was Soviet Union in that period. We had a national level or international even level, because now it's many states, of participation in the management. In that period, our group, Lyudmila Bulavka, our students, PhD students, young colleagues, we created Center for Education and for consultations. And for big enterprises with thousands of workers, it was a elaborated system of management with participation of workers. I want to tell a few words about this system because it's not well known. First of all, we said it's impossible to build self-management. It's necessary to grow up. It's like a tree. It's not like construction. It's not like building. It is tree. And it's very important to put a seed and then to help with water, with everything to grow up for this tree. From very simple forms to more and more developed. If you create during 1 month a very developed system of self-management, people will not participate. They don't have experience. They don't trust that this system will work. They don't believe themselves that they can do something. They're not subjects. They were not subjects for decades and decades. This is first principle. Second, the system of participation of workers, working people, must have different levels and different forms. In some aspects, it can be similar with really democratic state, where there is civil society with big rights, where there is parliament, and where there is executive power. Something similar we created in the enterprises. What is important? System similar with civil society. What does it mean? Even in Soviet Union, before perestroika, before Gorbachev period, 1980s, even before, in every enterprise in Soviet Union existed first women committee to protect women, especially who has kids and so on. Union of young technicians and scientists who created innovations. Formal but sometimes real Komsomol control of young workers, young specialists over administration. It was a trade union which did not have right to organize strike, but trade union had the rest house, hospital, free of charge house with free of charge flats of the enterprise. And distribution of all these things, of all these goods, were in the hands of trade union, not in the hands of administration. Even in bureaucratic Soviet system. It was like civil society, yeah, with like green organizations, women organizations, trade unions in really developed democracy. So, and if we want to make self-management, it is very important to have not only one system, I don't know, meeting of workers collective, council, and that's it. It's very important to have a big system of different organizations, real network, where everybody can participate in different forms. By the way, it was also cultural groups, it was sport groups in the enterprises. And it's interesting fact about Soviet system. State paid for artistic activity of workers of the enterprise. State paid for the sport activity of the workers of the enterprise. State paid for the technical activity, innovations, and so on. So it's an interesting system. It was not so simple. It was bureaucratic, it was oppression, it was millions of people who became victims of a Soviet system, but at the same time it was such forms which are not known. Post-Soviet Russia. First of all, when, when changes started in our country, it was a romantic hope, or maybe hopeless waiting that tomorrow, because of market and capitalist reforms, we are in Sweden. Everybody wanted to be in Sweden, not in the United States, as a result of collapse of the Soviet Union. As a result, we became citizens of Nicaragua, no, not Nicaragua, Bangladesh, or maybe, I don't know, a Central African country. It was terrible crisis. Betsy knows, she came to our country and helped a lot in this situation. But at the same time, we had the struggle against brutal privatization, against criminalization and so on from below. And at that period, some collective enterprises appeared and they're still alive. In our country, we have a few labor workers collective enterprises. The title is People's Enterprise, enterprise in the hands of the workers. We have only 50 such enterprises, but they are relatively big, some thousand workers in each of such enterprises, and very successful, in spite of all difficulties of Russian economy. So, but generally speaking, the lesson of the post-Soviet Russia is very important. If you have liberal market capitalist economy, survival of self-management or collective enterprises is extremely difficult and nearly impossible. It's an important lesson. Collective enterprises, solidarity economy can survive and develop in the circumstances if market and capitalism is very restricted by strong social institutions, civil society, left political parties and trade unions, Greens and so on. If it is at least a Swedish model of capitalism. But if it is a neoliberal model of capitalism integrated with bureaucracy, bureaucratic control, development of economy of solidarity, solidarity economy is extremely difficult. It's necessary to be heroes to develop collective enterprises in such circumstances. We have such heroes. Not we, but Russia has such heroes. And the most interesting experience, which will now describe Lyudmila, was in 1998, started in 1998, and it was for 3 years. This period from 1998 to 2000, 2001 was a very important turning point in our history. But unfortunately, we moved again to integration of liberalism with authoritarian political system, economic liberalism and authoritarian political system. Very negative conversion, if I can say so. But in 1998, we had some hopes for the better because we had the new prime minister, Primakov, who was, let's say, social democrat and very talented governor. He was a really great person and a real social democrat. In some aspects, similar with Olof Palme in Sweden, for example, if I can make any parallel. And after crisis of Yeltsin system, we had big changes, very rapid growth of economy. It was before collapse, 50% down, then stagnation. And Primakov period gave 7-8% growth. It was like a fantastic situation. And in this situation, working people started to fight against criminal business. And it was very interesting and successful experience. Lyudmila and her friends colleagues, they organized team which was analyzing this experience and consulting these enterprises in many cities. And now I will ask Ludmila to explain briefly this experience. There is a book, unfortunately, only in Russian, which she wrote. Ludmila speaks Russian, maybe a few words in English. I don't know why she doesn't want to speak English, but she is maybe too modest. I am brave to speak in Russian English, but she doesn't.
I'm very glad, dear Betsy, I'm very glad to hear, see you. I'm very, very happy. And I often remember you because you remember you and Robert when you organized very interesting conference of your Center for Global Justice. And this conference was very big помощь, help for us, because we researched the protest movement in post-Soviet Russia. We researched contradictions, positive experience and negative. Говоря коротко.
So now she will speak.
The lessons, that's why the lessons of protest experience is very, very important. That's why I'm very happy to participate in this discussion. Next, I will Russian.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will be interpreter.
Excuse me. Я объездила вместе с профессором Рудыком и Керемецким 40 заводов. Дальше, пожалуйста.
So, Ludmila, Professor Rudek and Professor Keremetsky, they analyzed the experience of 40 enterprises, 40 enterprises.
Мы исследовали те заводы, это 40 заводов. Правда, на Дальнем Востоке, во Владивостоке, ситуацию исследовала я уже одна.
And in the most dangerous places, Ludmila was alone, unfortunately. It was in far east of Russia. Russia is a very big country, 12,000 kilometers. So in far east is the most east part near Japan. And it was also in this part. She was in this part, yes.
Нас интересовало прежде всего те предприятия, те заводы, где были активные протестные мероприятия, протестные формы борьбы.
So in Russia in that period, protest movements took place in many enterprises, but they made choice. And 40 enterprises where protest was, first of all, very active, radical, and had success.
Я покажу основные характеристики этого протестного движения. Soциально-культурный портрет движения экономической солидарности.
So, and Ludmila will summarize some main features of this experience, mainly social, cultural aspects of solidarity economy.
Предприятия. Первая черта – это первая черта. Рабочие пытались защитить и сохранить свои предприятия, потому что они имели потенциал для экономической эффективности.
It's a very interesting paradox. Russian business destroyed economy, destroyed production, and working people were trying to reorganize production. In some enterprises, it was a pack house, not even production, but they started production again, and main interest was to restart production.
Например, Выборгский целлюлозно-бумажный комбинат, на котором делалась бумага высочайшего качества, которая могла конкурировать на международных рынках. И там была технология такого высокого класса, бумагоделательная машина, таких машин в мире только 4. Завод был построен еще в советское время и работал очень эффективно.
So one of the examples is Vyborg paper factory. Vyborg is far western town in the border of near Finland. And in this Viborg factory, which was built in 1980s, in the end of Soviet period, equipment was very, very good. It was one of the best 4 enterprises in this branch of economy. And in 90s it was completely destroyed. Production was destroyed.
И этот завод был куплен криминальным собственником совершенно дешево, и он решил делать не бумагу, а гнать водку. Ибо это более, как ему казалось, это имеет больший спрос.
So, and this enterprise for very small money bought criminal businessmen, better to say bandit, I will say from, and he decided that it's difficult to produce paper and to sell paper. It's much easier and more profitable to produce vodka. And she stopped production and started speculation with vodka.
И эти технологии этого предприятия были очень высокие, поэтому они требовали, чтобы древесина была особого класса. Здесь же этот новый хозяин по фамилии Саботаж пускал все, что лежало на дорогах, бровках и так далее. Нарушая технологии, ломая машины.
Finally, equipment was destroyed because it was necessary to follow to technological norms, and it was necessary to be specialist to do this. And he really destroyed the system.
В результате рабочие организовали круглосуточное дежурство. Те, кто не работал, отработали рабочую смену, свободны, начинают дежурить, охранять эту машину. И однажды ночью, все-таки, когда рабочие сели немножко перекусить, ворвалась полиция, которая была предназначена для подавления бунтов в тюрьмах, и начали расстреливать рабочих.
So, and the workers occupied factory to protect production and to rebuild production of the paper. But it was not profitable for this Sabotage, this bandit. And he invited special troops for fight against uprising in the prisons. It's special police, very brutal police. And they attacked enterprise. Workers were controlling enterprise. They were sitting in the enterprise after work to protect occupation by bandits. And it was a big struggle between these special police and workers.
Я приехала на этот завод спустя несколько часов после того, как произошла вся эта трагедия.
It was a real war, and Lyudmila came to this enterprise a few hours after the end of this battle.
Там было много полицейских. Я спрашиваю, почему вы не пускаете врачей к раненым рабочим? Они отказывались и отвечать, и вели себя очень агрессивно.
Police was very aggressive. It was a lot of wounded people, and they even didn't allow two doctors to come and to help them.
Но, тем не менее, после этого рабочие все равно пытались сохранить свою власть на предприятии, продолжали охранять завод, и более того, они вместе с рабочими Ленинградского металлического завода и Санкт-Петербургского завода комбинат цветной печати, Ленинградский комбинат, они организовали вместе комитет солидарности, вместе участвовали в митингах, помогали, у них был общий фонд солидарности материальный, помогали всем, чем могли.
So, what is important, in the same region, very big region, Leningradskaya Oblast, there were another enterprises. It was Leningrad Metal Factory, Leningrad factory for production of books and so on, some enterprises where workers also organized control and occupation. And they controlled, they organized solidarity actions, mutual funds, mutual assistance, and mutual fight against brutal business.
Вторая черта очень важная. Рабочие пытались взять функции контроля над продукцией своего предприятия.
Not only in this enterprise, but everywhere where workers started protest, They organized control over production and over sale of the production to prevent, it's necessary to explain, Russian business was selling illegally production without paying taxes and so on. And workers organized control to pay taxes, to make everything legal, not to have this illegal business. It's very interesting experience. Workers were fighting for legal business.
Например, мы приехали в Ясногорский машиностроительный завод, где делали двигатели для тепловозов. Рабочие работают месяц, два, три, а заработной платы нет. Полгода рабочие работают, а заработной платы нет. И тогда рабочие решили узнать, почему нет денег, заработной платы. Ночью они вышли на территорию завода, где стояли машины с продукцией, и они перекрыли всю территорию завода, закрыли все ворота. И давай спрашивать у водителей документы на отгрузку. Когда они посмотрели, там в документах было оформлено не двигатели, а метелки, которыми подметают улицы. То есть идет администрация крала у себя.
So, and it was very interesting experience also in Yasnogorsk machinery factory. They were producing engines for locomotives, railway locomotives. And they were making very good motors, engines, and for export and so on. But officially, owner did not sell anything, and he did not pay wages to the workers during half a year. And workers organized control, and they understood that this businessman is stealing production of his own factory and selling illegally this production in order not to pay wage and not to pay taxes. And they stopped this illegal business. It's a very interesting experience.
Да. И что сделали рабочие? Они перекрыли территорию завода и сказали, позвонили ночью директору и сказали, теперь мы создали группу рабочего контроля, и без нашей подписи ни одна машина не поедет с территории завода. То есть они взяли власть, контрольную власть над продукцией сами.
And it was practical action. They blockaded gates and they said, we will control. And if you want to sell something, you must make all documents and we must receive information how much money you received. And then we will control how this money were used. So it was control over production, over sale, and over financial operations by workers. And it was force, workers organized force to stop illegal business.
И без подписи председателя профсоюзного комитета рабочих, группы рабочего контроля, ни одна машина больше не выходила. То есть они стали контролировать дирекцию.
And for any operation, it was necessary to have two signatures: signature of the manager and signature of the leader of workers' control of trade union.
И последний, третий, короткий пример. Все рабочие с этих предприятий завода протестных всегда давали открытую информацию, что они делают и как они делают, и каковы результаты.
And very important, all factories, not only this which she mentioned, but other factories too, they made everything absolutely openly. It was open information for everybody, so-called гласность. Maybe you remember from Gorbachev period, it was such word, гласность. Yes, and it was no secret. All activity of self-management was absolutely open. And this is also a very important lesson.
Так, например, рабочие. Щучанский мукомольный завод, где делали муку, это Курганская область, это Урал, северный район Урала. И рабочие тоже требовали зарплату, вели борьбу. А администрация давала ложную, давала фейки, давала вместо правдивой информации. Тогда рабочие начали вести все время запись на видео. Что они сделали? Они поставили перед входом на территорию этого комбината стол, телевизор и стали показывать записи видео. В результате горожане, жители города проходят мимо и все видят сами, своими глазами. То есть добивались правдивого информирования жителей города, и не только рабочих.
Very interesting experience in Shchuchansk. This is Ural, central Russia, and factory producing necessary things for bread. Muka, I don't know in English, I'm sorry. And it was a lot of fake information by management. So what they made video of all internal operations, all economic actions, all documents, and they put big TV set in front of the gates of the enterprises, and all citizens of the town could see what is happening in the enterprise. It was open air report about activity of management. No secret, absolutely transparent management. So,
и теперь очень коротко 3 урока. Первое. Рабочие, все эти комитеты рабочие, профсоюзные, работали с представителями разных политических партий, но только в том случае, если эти партии помогали делом, а не политической риторикой.
So, about cooperation or relations with political parties, it was very simple but very important principle. If political party helps to organize, control, information, find resources, good party, we are working with this party. If party only tell beautiful words about socialism, communism, democracy, and so on, no cooperation. Go out. You must work, not talk.
Второе. Рабочие поняли, что если они не будут выступать с инициативами, то начальство их задавит. Вот эти криминальное новое руководство, оно просто их задавит. То есть инициатива должна быть прежде всего в борьбе за рабочими.
And what is important also, it's necessary to realize new initiatives, not defense, but attack, not military attack, but attack in actions, in social creativity. Initiative must belong to workers, not to administration, not to bosses.
У нас дома 3 коробки из-под банан, где лежат записи, аудиозаписи всех интервью, которые я брала на этих 40 заводах. Главный вопрос задавала: что самое трудное для вас? Знаете, что отвечали рабочие? Это пассивность основной массы. Они называли конформистское болото. Вот это самое трудное препятствие для активистов.
So, also Lyudmila made a lot of interviews with militants of this movement. We have 3 huge boxes
from
banana
дома.
With cassettes. It was our cassettes in that period. Of these interviews, and all militants of social movements, of protest movement, said that the most big problem is the conformism of ordinary people. People are afraid to do something. People are afraid to participate in social activity. And not bureaucracy, not business, not even police, but this passive conformist inertia of people is the most big obstacle for self-management.
И последнее, главный позитивный урок этих протестных акций, которые возникли за экономическую справедливость, которые возникли в условиях дикого капитализма, который Александр Бузгалин называет Jurassic Park of capitalism.
And it's important to understand that all these activities took place in the situation of brutal criminal capitalism, and Lyudmila said that we made name, Betsy remember, Jurassic capitalism's Jurassic Park, with dinosaurs who are fighting between themselves.
И главный урок. Рабочие заставили работать и интеллигенцию. Мы вместе с этими рабочими организовали школу рабочего самоуправления, которая работала 5 лет, пока это было протестное движение. Мы приглашали их на конференцию в Москву, в Санкт-Петербург и проводили, когда конференции, но по одному принципу.
So, and it's also important that this practical experience of workers gave a basis for cooperation with intelligentsia. During 5 years when this active movement took place, we had the School for Self-Management, similar with your Center for Global Justice. We had the conferences, international conferences, and you participated in some of them. It was an important form of organization, which Людмила will describe.
Главный принцип, когда мы собирались вместе, там человек 40, например, 50. Каждый активист выступает, но мы запрещали говорить, что надо сделать. Нет, скажи, что ты сделал за этот последние 3 месяца, что у тебя получилось и почему, и что не получилось, почему.
So, and when we organized this school, it was not mainly lectures, it was a round table of people who came from these enterprises, and it was forbidden to say what has to be done. It was necessary to say what you did, and what is positive result, and why you received positive result, and what is negative result, why you did not have success.
Выступает лидер профсоюза вот с этого Ясногорского машиностроительного завода и говорит, мы 10 дней голодали, а толку нет. И не мы, профессора, а сами рабочие сказали, Андрей, ты неправильно сделал, надо делать было по-другому. И они обмениваются советами, дают альтернативные предложения. Вот это было позитивно.
For example, one of the leaders said, we organized hunger strike. 10 days we were in hunger strike, but it was no result. And 3 other leaders said, oh, it's mistake. It was necessary to do another activity and describe what is necessary to do in such situation because they had success. So it was mutual teaching, mutual assistance.
И последнее хочу похвастать. Вместе с комитетом рабочих Выборгского целлюлозного бумажного комбината мы организовали вместе конференцию на этом комбинате Выборгском, где собрались представители всех протестных заводов, все представители всех профсоюзов, которые участвовали в этой борьбе. Вся интеллигенция, которую приглашали, это были гости. Дали только этот комитет, дал 2 билета, сделав делегатами только 2 человека из этой интеллигенции. Это был профессор Бузгалин и я. Простите за хвастовство.
So, and what is also important that it was necessary to, it was not necessary, it was organized, real solidarity. And one of the key points of this solidarity was the conference which took place in this Vyborg factory, which Ludmila described, with battle, with police, fight, and so on. It was 200 delegates from different enterprises from all Russia. And all political leaders and the intelligentsia, they were guests and sitting in the balcony.
На втором этаже.
But only 2 delegates from intelligentsia. It was Ludmila and me, who were delegates of the conference, not guests.
Главный вывод, спрашиваю рабочих, что вы можете сказать в качестве заключения? Знаете, что сказали рабочие? Нам терять нечего, предприятия-то они забирают. Остались цепи, но нам их терять не жалко.
So, and finally they made conclusion that this experience, even if we did not receive victory, and in some cases it was impossible to create collective enterprise, but they rebuilt production, they rebuilt wages, paying wages, and they finally had local but success.
И вот эти практики экономической справедливости, которые были в постсоветской России, имеют огромное значение. Вот сейчас мы хотим как-то, я хочу переиздать эту книгу и показать, насколько это актуально сегодня вместе с результатами анализа, над которыми работает ваш центр, дорогая Бетти.
So, and now it's very important to maybe to show again this experience, the lessons of this experience. And Ludmila is finishing second variant of the book. It was published after this event's book, Nonconformism, written by Ludmila. And now she's preparing second edition of this book. And the work is, our work is similar in many aspects with work of Center for Global Justice, which organized our meeting. And Ludmila says, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for attention. And excuse me, many times my speech is, thank you very much.
So, we'll sit together.
Yes.
We will sit together, and it was main characteristics of the experience which we had in our country. Of course, not everything, because we had 40 minutes for presentation. And now we have continuation of this activity. We have, as I said, 50 collective enterprises. We have some new attempts to organize workers' control and so on in our country. But unfortunately, situation now became very difficult in Russia. And we are not waiting, we are working, but now working mainly for summarizing of the lessons and the experience for the future struggle. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
The point that really rings home to me is when Ludmila discusses the problem of conformism and to have self-management. Of course, you need people who can think for themselves and who can take initiative, and being bogged down in conformism is not a solution. Anyway, I don't know if we can take questions because Sasha's not here to answer them and Ludmila's not here to answer them. So would you like to comment? Al, you were with Sasha recently.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of words, try not to go on. So I was, the very end of August, I sat down and talked with him, and part of what he talked about, of course, was what was going on in Russia and the war and stuff, which he didn't talk about in this thing, and I'm not going to talk about it either, because that's something else. But the one thing that I actually do want to mention is that Sasha and Ludmila were obviously as spark plugs for a group which is bigger than themselves, and with them gone, the group is continuing to try to orient itself and figure out how to move forward. One of the groups I work with now that I'm in Europe is called the International Initiative for Promoting Political Economy, something like IRPE in the United States, maybe a little bit more Marxist in a sort of soft, open Marxist, non-dogmatic sort of sense, but same general idea. And we move around and have a conference, different places each year, maybe 300, 350 presentations. And this coming year, this is about all I'm going to say. This coming year, this September, we'll be meeting in Istanbul. And because it's in Istanbul, the Russians will be able to participate, which they haven't been able to participate for quite a few years. And the Russians, and Sasha in particular, were regular participants in these meetings. And there will be a group from there of some of the people that work closely with Sasha. And they the names that they give to themselves as a group or a school, I don't know if I'd really call it a school, but more an approach, don't matter too much, and different people say it a little bit, but they consider themselves more or less the post-Soviet critical Marxism is what they're trying to do. That's sort of what they do, and you get the idea that it ties into exactly what Sasha and Ludmila were just talking about, the effort from below towards self-organization, which of course is exactly the same thing that socialism was all about. And so the overlap between the social and solidarity economy, the movement for an authentic socialism, including maybe going back to Marx and Engels, and what these people are trying to do in Russia is very important. And that's just one final thing I'd say, there's a lot of people around the world that don't have their roots in the West, in Europe and the North, and a lot of them are trying to find their way towards some of the same things we are, in different cultural settings, often different languages and stuff like that. And it's really important to listen to what they say and how they say it. And it'll be a big opportunity this September to hear this group of post-Soviet critical Marxists come down, in particular talking about what they're doing, including a particular attention to the work of Sasha, which they will do some presentation on.
Well, I hope we can go and participate. But it's great to see you, Al, and
Nice.
Robin. It's great to see them. What? Yeah, please keep us informed about the meeting in Istanbul.
Sure.
Robin, Mark, Norma, anything to add? Questions?
I just posted something in the chat. Yesterday, this person, Harpal Brar, spoke with us. His basic point is that you're not going to maintain the communist effort as so well described here, the conflicts that arose, but the reasons were so exciting. And we look for the furtherance of that kind of behavior. We're not going to achieve the goals of communism when production for use is overcome by production for exchange, which many of you students of, I guess, Lenin are familiar with, and I wasn't until yesterday. Basically, I mean, I understand the idea, but not the origin of the idea. I don't study that much. Anyway, so it was a fine discussion that followed, and I can post you the connection on the internet to the whole presentation, possibly.
Thank you, Norma. Well, we will look forward to hearing more about the international initiative for promoting political economy and the work that they do. So,
If I could
I'll
say
thank
one more
everyone
thing,
who
Betsy,
came.
if I could say
Sure.
one more thing, just of interest,
Sure.
especially with Mark here, who's such an expert on Cuba, as witnessed by his background picture there.
I was wondering who that was. I can't.
That's Marty with the child in front of the
Oh, okay.
American
It's hard to see.
interest section down there. But what I wanted to say again, tying back to the work of Sasha over decades, is Sasha was, a person that didn't get hung up in terms. He paid attention to what movements were, what people were fighting for, what some of the essential stuff were. He didn't have to worry about. And anyways, one of the things I just wanted to say is a book came out, and Mark may well know it, but not. But the book ties into what you've been talking about, Betsy. It's called The Social and Solidarity Economy in Cuba. And so people should just be aware of it.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, it just came out last year. And it's very interesting because it makes the argument, of course, which people like Sasha would appreciate entirely, that, of course, the fundamental goals of at least wings of the social and solidarity economy, and that's all over the place, are similar with the goals of socialism, though, of course, socialism is all over the place, too. So that's not any different. But just give me the titles here, just give an idea. Chapter 1, Socialism is the Solution, Not the Problem, a solidarity and socially responsible formula for a prosperous economy. Number 2, now more than ever, a social and solidarity economy is necessary to build socialism in Cuba, and so forth and so on. So the book is written mostly by Cubans. It's edited by 2 Cubans. And so but it ties in with this idea that as we move forward, a lot of people are going to have to break terminology and group identities that they had in the past and look to actual people in motion to, you know, do what socialism is all about, allow people to develop their humanity collectively.
The conflicts that were told us by the speakers today are just brilliant indications of how we struggle, the descriptions of what we're immersed in. I call it from the cradle. We are immersed in competition, and that changes when you run a communist society. China, I tell people in China that children were given in kindergarten or whatever, jackets that buttoned up the back. So you would see lines of children buttoning each other's jacket.
Well,
And
that's one example. Robin, did you want to
Yeah.
add something?
Yeah, first of all, Betsy, it's good to see you again.
Oh, good to
I'm-
see you.
and
You're
I'm
kind of
really-
dark though.
I'm glad I managed to, you know, to make this, to watch this live. Yes, hearing somebody recount, you know, the struggles during the period in the 1990s and since, you know, in Russia. Yes, it's like deja vu, remembering that. And it's really interesting to always remember that even during very bad periods when the overall trend is in a wrong direction, that sometimes there are all sorts of wonderful things that are going on in the middle of all that. You know, including in the middle of the worst part of the worst war ever fought. You know, even that part of what they were talking about was, it's great to remember that. I wanted to ask a question, which is, I know that David Kotz spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe during the 90s. I know that Tom Weisskopf did as well. Essentially trying to argue that when you reform the old system, it doesn't have to become neoliberal, corrupt oligarchic capitalism, that there is an alternative. And I'm just curious whether they would have known Sasha and the group of people that, you know, I've really met for the first time just watching this video, if those are people that are also, you know, part of that entire time period.
Oh yeah, David Kotz was one of the other U.S. Academics who was with us back in the early 90s at Sasha's conferences in Moscow. And Tom Weisskopf was also involved, as I recall, wasn't he? Yeah, so they were participating then.
Well, that's good for me to know, because I'm in contact with David fairly often on a lot of subjects, and I will chastise him for not having made me aware of this other group of people.
Well, the world is a big place and everybody's very busy.
Yes, it is.
So, would anyone else like to add anything? No. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And it's particularly nice to hear from Al, who was with Sasha so recently. And we don't know what, I think it was a stroke. I mean, he was 69, he's my age. I know that his work schedule was just absolutely frantically insane. And I know the war in Ukraine must have been a terrible stress and burden on him. But I don't know. I don't know. If I find out, I'll let you know. And you let me know if you find out. Anyway, we're very lucky to have known him, and it would be wonderful if the conference in Istanbul could have some HIMAG could have some Zoom features, and so that other people who knew Sasha around the world can participate. It'd be very interesting to also see what the Chinese that Sasha was working with, what they're thinking. And anyway, onward we go, convinced that self-management and a participatory economy are part of the world we want to see, and a world that will be fruitful for socialism and vice versa. And of course, we look to Cuba to see how they're struggling and surviving and developing the same, along the same lines of thought. So it's great to see all of you guys who I know are working towards the same goal that we are, from very different origins, I could say, but we're still working towards the same goal. So thank you very much. Comments? Anything else? Next Monday, we're going to be talking, thank you. Next week, we're going to be talking about Julian Assange. And his trial is coming up, or his hearing about being extradited to the US is next week. And thank you for joining.